Hot springs in Dusun Tua was a popular tourist attraction during British colonization era of Malaya. Located about 20 kilometers southeast of Kuala Lumpur, nestled between the tropical mountains between Langat River, hot springs provide the comfortness to the visitors with its purported benefits to the skin. What are the reasons that the hot springs in Dusun Tua became a tourist attraction in British Malaya, and why those hot springs are no longer an important tourist attraction as they used to be? Let's take a dip onto the hot springs water and understand of the hot spring tourism in the 20th century British Malaya. The culture of bathing in the hot spring is popularized by the British colonials between late 19th century and early 20th century. In Britain, hot springs have been used since the Celtic era with bathhouses built during the Roman era about 2000 years ago. British are attracted to the hot springs such as in Bath, Boston Spa, Droitwich Spa and Harrogate due to skin health benefits brought by mineral-rich hot springs water. Therefore, bathing in the hot springs in a place far from home makes the cultural experiences as in Spa Town back in Britain possible. Malaysia is not located within the Pacific Ring of Fire, thus there are no major volcanic activities in the country that cause the hot springs to appear. Instead, groundwater within the earth crust were pressurized underground and heated due to heated underground rock, then the water ejected from the ground with high temperature. Based on the research paper by Bott in 1890, there are several hot springs found scattered near the mountains in Selangor and Melaka. The nearest hot springs from the center of Kuala Lumpur is at Setapak, today located inside Resource Spring Apartment at Jalan Air Panas. There are several hot springs locations in Hulu Langat. There are 2 hot spring ponds in Dusun Tua, one nearby the IKBN Hulu Langat and another behind a musola. There is one hot springs behind a restaurant in Sungai Serai, another at Sungai Lalang near Semenyih, and one in Kampung Jawa inland that was found when a piling for the new mosque building struck a hot water aquifer. According to a scientific research published in the year 2019, it was found that the hot springs water in Hulu Langat contains traces of minerals such as sodium, potassium, magnesium, silica and zinc, beneficial to the skin health. As the water is good for the skin, I would like to test how hot the water is by dipping the feet. Dip the feet into the water. Wow! Ow! Ow! The reason of why I came to visit hot springs in Hulu Langat, specifically at Dusun Tua, is that the existence of the hot springs were mentioned in an old tourist guidebook published in the early 20th century. In the book, The Illustrated Guide to the Federated Malay States by Cuthbert Woodville Harrison, first published in 1910, Dusun Tua was mentioned to have famous sulphur baths with the jungle filled with squirrels and flying foxes. Dusun Tua retained its rural landscape, but unlike the other tourist attractions founded during British colonization era, the colonial bungalows in Dusun Tua are little known even to the Malaysians. The colonial bungalows in Dusun Tua were the rest houses owned by the colonial government and maintained by a public works department. In his 1910 book, Harrison's mention of the bungalows with curated lawns and hot springs nearby, surrounded by fruit trees and jungles. However, there is little information whether the hot springs that mentioned by Harrison in 1910 is the 2 hot springs that are available in Dusun Tua today. There are little or no traces of colonial bungalows nearby the hot springs. Some colonial bungalows elsewhere, such as in Cameron Highlands and Port Dickson, continues to function as rest houses. The combination of its closeness to Kuala Lumpur, the hot springs water that is good for skin, the scenic tropical mountains and chilly morning has made Hulu Langat the popular weekend retreat for the British living in Malaya. The government rest houses were prioritized for the government officials and only accepting civilians if there was a vacancy. For the British, of course. Because of the remoteness of the location of government rest houses including at Dusun Tua, The amenities were limited and the food selection was limited to whatever the caretaker could prepare in a tiffin. Within its beauty, jungle also caused issues in remote areas such as mosquito, sandflies, insect and wild animals. In the post-World War time, after the end of the World War II in 1945, government rest houses were competing either with the cheap lodgings in the city that provide better value for money and luxury hotels that provide better amenities. Furthermore, new hot springs that are found across the country such as Tambun and Sungai Kelah in Perak, Pedas in Negeri Sembilan, Cerana Putih and Jasin in Melaka, Bentong in Pahang, Tok Bok in Kelantan, Poring in Sabah and other minor hot spring sites has made Hulu Langat no longer an exclusive hot springs location. Some of the hot spring locations such as in Tambun and Sungai Kelah have redeveloped as water parks to accommodate more visitors and provide non-hot springs water amenities as well. The number of hot springs across the country makes people simply visit the nearest hot spring or visit the hot springs that has more amenities for the whole family than the no-frills basic amenities as in Dusun Tua. As a result, hot springs in Hulu Langat is no longer a unique attraction on its own. Today, the hot springs in Hulu Langat still attract a few local visitors, unlike during its heyday when it attracted the British living in Kuala Lumpur. The new expressway project, East Klang Valley Expressway or EKVE, should reduce the driving time and encourage more people to visit Hulu Langat. However, EKVE construction seems stalled, thus Hulu Langat continue the reliance on road B52 that is notorious for its heavy traffic. Due to Hulu Langat location near the mountains, waterfalls and brooks are more popular to the visiting urban dwellers than the hot springs. Even on the road signboard, the direction to the nearby waterfalls and brooks are more prominent as more people visited the waterfalls than the hot springs. Due to high water temperature, visitors are not allowed to jump into the hot spring pond, or the other visitors will hear some uncomfortable screams. Instead, ladles are provided to pour the hot springs water onto the body, let the water cool down a bit. The hot springs in Dusun Tua are open to the public and can be visited by all ages, ethnics and nationalities. In fact, when I visited the hot spring behind the Musola, the only people who were there are the group of Chinese uncles. Meanwhile, the hot springs in front of IKBN Hulu Langat is tolerable to dip the feet and not suitable to dip the whole body. The water temperature can reach up to 70 degrees Celsius. Don't jump into the hot spring pond unless you want to turn into a stew. Today, Hulu Langat hot springs are enjoyable by all and visited by a few. A glimpse of what used to be a major tourist attraction in the early 20th century British Malaya. If you want to visit the hot springs in Hulu Langat, there are several points where you can bath with the hot springs water. There are hot springs at Sungai Serai, mile 12 behind the restaurant, and open air hot springs near IKBN Hulu Langat, and a hot spring near a Musola, both in Dusun Tua, mile 16. There is another hot springs next to Kampung Jawa Mosque further inland. By public transport, you can take the bus D406 from MRT Seri Raya Station. In 2024, the charge for Sungai Serai Hot Springs is RM5 per person, whereas at two hot springs in Dusun Tua, donations are welcome to the visitors. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new about hot springs in Hulu Langat and its significance in the country's tourism history. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next video.